The new chef's hands trembled as she cooked for the critics. When they learned where she slept last month, the entire dining room went quiet. The wind howled through the narrow alley, whipping around the cardboard boxes Sarah Williams had carefully arranged against the brick wall. Her hands shook as she pulled the thin blanket tighter around her two children. The temperature had dropped below freezing hours ago. "Mama, I'm cold," 8-year-old Marcus whispered, his teeth chattering. Beside him, 6-year-old Tommy coughed, the sound echoing off the graffiti-covered walls. "I know, baby. Just hold on." Sarah's voice cracked. She pulled both boys closer, trying to share what little warmth she had left. The cardboard beneath them had gone damp, seeping cold through their worn clothes. Tommy's cough got worse. Sarah pressed her hand against his forehead, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. The fever was back. "Is someone going to help us?" Marcus asked, his small fingers clutching Sarah's threadbare coat. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. 6 months ago, she'd been head cook at Luigi's, making enough to keep their small apartment. Now, after the restaurant closed without warning, they were here. Each shelter they'd tried had been full. "Remember what Daddy used to say?" she whispered, trying to distract them. "About the stars?" Marcus looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible between the buildings. "That they're like night lights God left on for us?" "That's right." Sarah's throat tightened. James had always known how to make the boys smile. 2 years since the construction accident, and his absence still felt like an open wound. A car's headlights swept across the alley entrance. Sarah tensed, pulling the boys closer. Most people ignored them, but some nights brought trouble. The vehicle, an expensive-looking black sedan, slowed to a stop. "Stay behind me," Sarah whispered, positioning herself between her children and whatever was coming. A tall man in a business suit stepped out. In the dim streetlight, Sarah could see his gray hair and worried expression. He carried several containers that smelled of food. "I saw you folks earlier," he said, keeping his distance. "I own Anderson's downtown. Thought you might be hungry." Sarah's stomach cramped at the smell of hot food. She recognized the name. Anderson's was one of Detroit's finest restaurants. The kind of place she'd dreamed of working at before everything fell apart. "Thank you," but she started. Tommy's cough interrupted her, followed by Marcus's quiet whimper. The man, Mr. Anderson, set the containers down and stepped back. "It's just leftovers from tonight's service," he said. "Good food going to waste otherwise." Sarah hesitated. Pride warred with necessity. Another gust of wind cut through the alley, and Tommy shivered violently against her. "There's a coffee shop around the corner," Anderson continued. "Open all night. Warm inside." Sarah stared at him, trying to judge his intentions. 20 years in restaurant kitchens had taught her to read people. His concerns seemed genuine. "Marcus, help your brother up," she said finally. "Careful with the blanket." They gathered their few possessions, a backpack with spare clothes, Tommy's stuffed bear, the blanket, and followed Anderson to the coffee shop. The blast of warm air as they entered made Sarah's eyes water. "Hot chocolate for the boys?" Anderson asked, heading to the counter. Sarah nodded, helping them into a booth. Under the fluorescent lights, she could see how pale Tommy had become. Anderson returned with drinks and opened the food containers. The aroma of perfectly seasoned beef bourguignon filled the air. Sarah recognized the technique, classic French cuisine. "You know food," Anderson said, watching her examine the dish. "I was a cook. Luigi's on 7th, before it closed." "Luigi's?" Anderson raised an eyebrow. "Good place. Shame about the owner's gambling debts." Sarah watched her boys eat, some color returning to their cheeks. "We had 3 days' notice. Not enough time to find another job, make rent." "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah Williams, these are my boys, Marcus and Tommy." Anderson nodded, studying her with renewed interest. "We lost our head chef last week. Walking the streets tonight, looking for inspiration for a new menu, and instead," he gestured at their booth. "Would you be interested in trying out? Place to stay while you train, of course." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "Mr. Anderson, Jim," he corrected. "And before you say no, I've been in restaurants 40 years. I know talent when I see it. The way you analyzed that bourguignon told me plenty." "I can't." Sarah looked at her boys, both nearly asleep in the warm booth. Tommy's cough had eased. "We don't have proper clothes. I don't have references anymore. We can solve those problems. Anderson pulled out a business card, wrote an address on the back. Hotel 2 blocks from the restaurant. Rooms paid for a week. Come by tomorrow at 2. We'll do a cooking test. See what you can do. Sarah held the card, her vision blurring. Why? Because 20 years ago, someone gave me a chance when I needed one. Anderson stood, leaving a stack of bills for the coffee shop staff. 2 o'clock, Sarah. Bring the boys, we got a break room, they can wait in. After he left, Sarah sat in the warm booth, holding her sleeping children, staring at the card. Outside, snow began to fall, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. The coffee shop staff let them stay until morning. As dawn broke over Detroit, Sarah straightened her worn clothes, braided her hair as neatly as she could, and led her boys toward the address on the card. They had 6 hours until the cooking test. 6 hours to find a way to make herself presentable, to prepare for a chance she never expected. Tommy's hand slipped into hers. Are we going to be okay, Mama? Sarah squeezed his fingers, thinking of the warmth in Anderson's kitchen, the possibility of a real future. Yeah, baby. I think we are. The hotel room, key felt heavy in Sarah's hand. Room 412. She stared at the brass numbers, remembering the last time she'd had a real door to open. Marcus and Tommy stood beside her, quiet and wide-eyed. Go ahead, Mama, Marcus whispered. The lock clicked. Inside, 2 queen beds weighted with clean white sheets. A bathroom with actual towels. A television. Tommy ran straight to the nearest bed and pressed his face into the pillow. Careful, baby. We need to stay clean for later. Sarah set their backpack down. They had 4 hours until the cooking test at Anderson's. The bathroom mirror showed her exactly what she didn't want to see. Dark circles under her eyes, hair fighting to escape its braid. She turned on the shower, hot water, real pressure, and helped Tommy in first. Arms up, she said, washing months of alley grime away. Marcus, you're next. Clean and wrapped in hotel towels, the boys watched cartoons while Sarah scrubbed their clothes in the sink. The hotel hairdryer would have to do for drying them. What if the mean people don't like us? Tommy asked, coughing slightly. Sarah wrung out Marcus's jeans. Mr. Anderson likes us. That's what matters. At 1:30, they left the hotel. Sarah had done what she could with their appearance. The clothes were clean but worn. Her hair was neat. The boys' faces shone. Anderson's restaurant occupied the ground floor of a renovated factory. Heavy wooden doors. Windows that gleamed. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for the handle. Mrs. Williams Anderson met them in the entrance. He wore a crisp white chef's coat now. Right on time. Boys, want to see our game room? Tommy clutched Sarah's hand. Mama, it's okay, baby. Go with Mr. Anderson. The game room turned out to be a staff break room with a couch, TV, and stack of board games. Anderson had added snacks and juice boxes. Kitchen's through here, he told Sarah once the boys were settled. Ready? The kitchen gleamed. Stainless steel everywhere. 6-burner ranges. A proper grill station. Sarah's heart raced at the sight of it all. Afternoon crew starts at 4, Anderson explained. You've got the place to yourself for now. Show me what you can do. Sarah tied on the apron he offered. What would you like to see? Surprise me. Ingredients are prepped in the walk-in. Use whatever you need. Her hand stopped shaking the moment she opened the refrigerator. This, she knew. This was home. Your sauce work at Luigi's was notable, Anderson said, watching her gather ingredients. The reviews always mentioned it. Sarah smiled, pulling out shallots and fresh herbs. James, my husband, used to say I could make sauce in my sleep. She fell into the rhythm of cooking. Knife work first, precise and quick. Shallots diced perfectly. Herbs chiffonade. The range responded instantly to her touch. Classic French training? Anderson asked. Self-taught. Cookbooks from the library. YouTube when we had internet. Sarah adjusted the heat under her pan. Started as a dishwasher at 16. Worked my way up. The kitchen filled with the smell of searing meat, caramelizing vegetables. Sarah moved between stations with growing confidence. This was her element. A young man in kitchen whites appeared at the door. Chef Anderson, the wine delivery. Handle it, Mike. Anderson didn't take his eyes off Sarah's work. How's the sauce coming? Sarah tasted, adjusted seasoning. 2 minutes? The plating took 3 minutes. She'd chosen simple, white china, letting the food speak for itself. Anderson studied the dish. Pan-seared duck breast, cherry port reduction, root vegetable puree. Sarah wiped the plate's edge with a clean towel. Crispy leeks for texture. Anderson cut into the duck. Perfect medium rare. The sauce clung to the meat exactly as it should. He took a bite and closed his eyes. The position pays $60,000 to start, he said. Health insurance kicks in after 90 days. Staff apartment above the restaurant is yours until you find a place. Sarah gripped the counter. I haven't even. This is better than what my last head chef was doing. And he trained in Paris. Anderson took another bite. The apartment has 2 bedrooms furnished. Boys can start school next week. There's a good 1-3 blocks away. Why are you really doing this? Anderson set down his fork. 20 years ago, I was living in my car with a culinary degree and no prospects. A restaurant owner in Chicago saw something in me. Gave me a chance. He smiled. Now I own 6 restaurants across 3 states. Sometimes, Sarah, people just need a door opened. Sarah thought of her boys in the break room. A real bed every night. School supplies. Doctor visits for Tommy's cough. When do you need an answer? Take tonight. Talk to your boys. Come back tomorrow if you want a job. Anderson stood. The apartment key is at the front desk. Take it either way. You've got a week to decide. Sarah's hands shook again as she cleaned her station. A proper kitchen. A real home for her children. The boys were playing Connect 4 when she returned to the break room. Tommy's cough sounded better already. Can we see where you cooked, Mama? Marcus asked. Sarah led them through the swinging doors. The kitchen still smelled of her sauce. Tommy's eyes went wide at the shiny equipment. Is this going to be your kitchen? He whispered. Sarah touched the smooth steel of the range. What would you think about that? Living upstairs, going to school nearby? Marcus looked up at her. No more alleys? No more alleys, baby. Tommy hugged her legs. I like Mr. Anderson. He gave me apple juice. Gave me, Sarah corrected automatically. The familiar gesture nearly broke her. How long since she'd been able to just be their mother, not solely focused on survival. Anderson appeared in the doorway. Front desk has your key. Take tonight's menu home. Dinner service starts in an hour. Sarah gathered their backpack, her son's hands tight in hers. The apartment key felt even heavier than the hotel one had. Outside, the winter sun was setting. Sarah looked up at the windows above the restaurant. Light glowed behind them, warm and inviting. Where are we going, Mama? Marcus asked. Sarah squeezed his hand. Home, baby. We're going home? They climbed the stairs to the apartment. Another brass key. Another lock clicking open. But this time, when Sarah stepped through the door, she wasn't just seeking shelter. She was stepping into a future. The apartment above Anderson's restaurant felt too good to be true. Sarah stood in the doorway of the second bedroom, watching her boys sleep in real beds. Tommy's cough had settled into an occasional wheeze. Marcus had kicked off his covers, sleeping spread-eagled like his father used to. Her phone buzzed. A new prepaid model Anderson had given her along with the keys. The text read, Kitchen opens at 6 a.m. Staff meeting at 5:30. Jim, Sarah checked the time. 4:15 a.m. She hadn't slept, too afraid this would all disappear if she closed her eyes. The apartment came furnished with basic necessities. Dishes, linens, even some pantry staples. In the small bathroom, she found new toothbrushes still in their packages. She splashed cold water on her face and changed into the chef's whites Anderson had left. The fabric felt crisp, professional. A far cry from the clothes she'd worn in the alley just 2 days ago. Mama? Marcus stood in the bathroom doorway, rubbing his eyes. You leaving? Just going downstairs to work. Sarah straightened her collar. You boys can sleep more. I'll come check on you at breakfast time. Promise? Promise. She kissed his forehead. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mr. Anderson. The kitchen stairs creaked under her feet. At the bottom, voices drifted from behind the swinging doors. Sarah took a deep breath and pushed through. 6 people in chef's whites looked up from their coffee cups. Anderson stood at the center prep table, reviewing papers. Ah, Sarah. He gestured her over. Team, meet Sarah Williams, your new head chef." The silence was immediate. A man with graying temples, the sous chef, based on his stripes, set his cup down hard enough to slosh coffee. "Jim, a word?" His voice carried years of authority. Anderson nodded and followed him into the office. The remaining staff studied Sarah with varying degrees of skepticism. A young woman with bright red hair offered a hesitant smile. "I'm Kate. Pastry station. Don't get too friendly," someone muttered. "Week trial, right, boss?" Anderson emerged from the office. The sous chef followed, face set in rigid lines. "Sarah." Anderson handed her a stack of papers. "Today's prep lists, ordering sheets, staff schedules. Michael here will show you around." Michael, the sous chef, jerked his head toward the walk-in. "Shall we?" The tour was brutally efficient. Michael pointed out stations, equipment, and procedures in clipped tones. His experience showed in every movement. 20 years here," he said, checking thermometers. "Worked my way up from dishwasher. Thought I was next in line for head chef." Sarah met his eyes. "I didn't come here to take anything from you." "No." He gestured at her chef's coat. "Where'd you come from then? Some fancy place in Chicago? New York?" "Luigi's on 7th. Before that, DiMaggio's, Preston's Grill. Anywhere that would teach me more." Sarah checked the prep lists. "And yesterday, I was sleeping in an alley with my kids." Michael's face changed slightly. "The alley off Monroe?" Sarah nodded, already planning the day's workflow. "My sister." Michael cleared his throat. "After her divorce. 3 months in her car with my niece. Found a shelter eventually." "The shelters are full now," Sarah said quietly. "Winter's always worst." The kitchen doors swung open. Anderson entered with the day's delivery. "Everything clear?" "Clear, boss." Michael grabbed an apron. "Sarah, you want guard manger or protein prep first?" The morning proceeded in a blur of activity. Sarah's muscles remembered this dance, the constant motion, timing, coordination. She called orders, delegated tasks, kept the rhythm flowing. At 7:30, she ran upstairs to check on the boys. They sat at the small kitchen table, eating cereal Anderson had stocked in the cupboards. "You look like a real chef, Mama," Tommy said, milk dribbling down his chin. "Feel like one too?" She kissed them both. "Homework books are on the counter. I'll be up at lunch to make something special." Back in the kitchen, prep for lunch service was underway. Kate was mixing pastry dough, her movements precise and practiced. "Chef." Michael appeared with order forms, produced deliveries, short 3 cases of mushrooms, alternative supplier. Sarah considered the menu. "Substitute cremini for shiitake in the risotto. Adjust the stock accordingly." He nodded approvingly. "Already called Marco's. They'll have them in an hour." The lunch rush hit at 11:45. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as tickets started flowing. Her voice carried over the kitchen noise, clear and confident. 2 risotto, 1 salmon, 3 house salads. Fire table 12. The staff moved like a well-oiled machine. Michael anticipated her needs, sliding completed dishes under the heat lamps precisely when needed. "Behind you, chef." "Corner. Hot pan coming through." At 2:30, the rush finally slowed. Sarah wiped her forehead, reviewing the ticket times. Every order had gone out perfectly. "Not bad." Michael stood beside her, updating the prep lists. "You know your stuff?" "Thanks." Sarah checked her phone. No messages from upstairs. The mushroom substitution worked well. "Yeah, it did." He hesitated. "Look, about this morning." "Forget it." Sarah started writing the next day's prep lists. "I'd have felt the same way." Anderson appeared with a stack of comment cards. "Excellent service, team." "Sarah, your modifications to the risotto. Customers loved it." The afternoon prep shifted into dinner setup. Sarah ran upstairs again, finding the boys absorbed in their workbooks. "Mama, I did math." Tommy held up his paper. Miss Kate helped when she came up to use the bathroom. Sarah smiled. The pastry chef had flour on her cheeks. "Thanks, Kate. They're good kids." Kate gathered her apron. "Tommy's got a knack for fractions already." Dinner service brought the real test. Anderson's dining room filled with regular customers, all curious about the new chef. Sarah felt their expectations weighing on every plate. "Table 4 says the sauce is better than Jean-Marc's ever was," a server reported. "They want to know if it's a new recipe." Sarah shook her head. focusing on plating. Same recipe, just made with care. By closing time, her feet ached and her whites were stained with evidence of honest work. The kitchen gleamed after cleanup, ready for tomorrow. Staff meal? Michael was at the stove, stirring a pot of what smelled like curry. Let me grab the boys. Sarah's chest tightened. If that's okay? Family meal means family. He shrugged. Kate's bringing garlic bread. Upstairs, Sarah found Marcus and Tommy already in pajamas, their day's schoolwork neatly stacked. Hungry? They thundered down the stairs ahead of her. The kitchen staff had pushed prep tables together, setting out mismatched bowls and spoons. Sit here. Kate patted the bench beside her. Tommy can tell everyone about his fractions. Sarah watched her children dive into curry and conversation, accepted by this makeshift family of kitchen professionals. Michael caught her eye and nodded slightly. Early morning tomorrow, chef, he said, passing the garlic bread. Seafood delivery at 5. I'll be here. Sarah helped Tommy with his napkin. We'll all be here. The apartment waited above, warm and secure. But here in the kitchen, surrounded by the controlled chaos of restaurant life, Sarah finally felt something she'd lost months ago. She felt at home. That's the third burnt sauce tonight. Brian, the grill cook, dumped another ruined pan in the sink. Someone messed with the gas pressure on my station. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, checking the burners. 2 weeks into her new position, and equipment had started mysteriously malfunctioning. First, the walk-in temperature fluctuated. Then prep lists disappeared. Now this. Chef. Michael appeared at her elbow. Table 6 is asking about their steaks. 20 minutes on a mid-rare. The dining room was packed. Friday night service, and half her kitchen equipment seemed to be fighting her. Run a comp on table 6, Sarah ordered. Kate, I need 2 creme brulees expedited. Brian, switch to the backup range. A crash from the dish pit made everyone jump. Tommy stood in the doorway, surrounded by broken plates. I just wanted to say good night, he whispered. What's a street kid doing in my kitchen? The voice came from the prep area. Jerome, one of the line cooks, stood with his arms crossed. Health code violation waiting to happen. Sarah's hands clenched. Marcus, come get your brother. The older boy appeared, quickly leading Tommy away. Sarah heard sniffling as they climbed the stairs. Jerome, she kept her voice level. Clean up those plates. Then go home. You can't. I can and I am. Go home. Don't come back until you can remember this is my kitchen. The silence was thick enough to cut. Jerome threw his apron on the ground and stormed out. Table 8 still waiting on their risotto, Michael said quietly. Sarah turned back to the line. Fire 2 risotto, 3 salmon, 1 vegan special. Brian, how's that range? The rest of service was a blur of catches and fixes. Every plate that left her kitchen was perfect, but the cost and stress and extra work showed on everyone's faces. At cleanup, Sarah found a note taped inside her locker. Street trash doesn't belong in fine dining. Chef. Kate stood in the doorway. The boys are asleep. I checked before leaving the break room. Sarah crumpled the note. Thanks, Kate. Good work tonight on those brulees. Those burners didn't malfunction on their own. Kate twisted her apron. Jerome's been here 5 years. He was next in line after Michael for sous chef. Politics. Sarah started counting the evening's receipts. I didn't ask for this position. No. Michael joined them, carrying prep lists. You earned it. Jerome's been riding on seniority, not skill. The next morning, Sarah arrived at 4:30 a.m. to find the walk-in door propped slightly open. Half their prep was spoiled. Sabotage. Michael surveyed the damage. This is deliberate. Sarah was already on the phone with suppliers. I need emergency delivery of produce and proteins. Yes. I'll pay rush charges. Chef. Anderson stood in the doorway. A word. In his office, Anderson looked grave. Health inspector called. Anonymous complaint about food safety violations. The walk-in. Sarah's stomach dropped. Someone's trying to shut us down. They're coming Monday. Anderson passed her a file. Every record needs to be perfect. Temperature logs, cleaning schedules, inventory rotation. I'll handle it. Sarah. Anderson leaned forward. I'm not wrong about you. Prove it. Back in the kitchen, the staff was rallying. Kate had started emergency prep. Brian was sanitizing every surface of his station. Heard about the inspection. Michael checked the new delivery. We've got your back, chef. The lunch service was short-staffed without Jerome, but smoother. No equipment malfunctions. No missing items. Sarah ran upstairs between shifts to check on the boys. Tommy's social studies homework lay open on the table. Mrs. Chen from next door helped us, Marcus explained. She's teaching Tommy Chinese too. That's wonderful, baby. Sarah hugged them both. I'm sorry about last night. Is the mean man gone? Tommy asked. Yes, he's gone. Sarah checked the time. I've got to get back. Dinner prep starts soon. The evening crew worked with focused intensity. Word of the upcoming inspection had spread. Temperature logs updated, Kate reported. All storage containers labeled and dated. Sanitation checklist completed, Brian added. Equipment maintenance records are current. Sarah moved through her kitchen, checking every detail. The dining room filled up. Orders flowed. At 8, Anderson appeared with a guest. Sarah, meet James Chun, restaurant critic for the Detroit Free Press. Sarah's pulse jumped. Chun was notorious for brutal honesty in his reviews. Challenging evening for a review, Michael muttered. Fire 2 duck 1 seafood special, Sarah called. Extra care on these, team. The kitchen moved like clockwork. Each plate was scrutinized twice before leaving the pass. Sarah personally finished Chen's dishes. Chef. The server returned with Chen's plates. Clean. Empty. He wants to meet you. Sarah straightened her whites and stepped into the dining room. Chen sat finishing a glass of wine. Interesting sauce work, he said. French technique, but there's something else. Something personal. My own variations, Sarah admitted. Developed over years in different kitchens. Chen nodded. Heard there were some staffing changes recently. We're adjusting. Clearly, he stood to leave. Watch your back, chef. Restaurant politics can get ugly. Sarah returned to the kitchen to find Anderson on the phone, face dark. That was Jerome's lawyer, he said after hanging up. Wrongful termination suit. Claims discrimination. The room spun slightly. Sarah gripped the prep table. He can't prove anything, Michael said. We all saw what happened. He's claiming I fired him for questioning my competence. Sarah's voice was steady. That I'm unqualified and using my circumstances for sympathy. Circumstances? Kate asked. Being homeless? Sarah met their eyes. Yes, I slept in alleys with my boys before this job. Yes, I'm living in the staff apartment. No, I won't apologize for surviving. Silence fell. Then Brian spoke up. Chef, my mom ran a shelter in Chicago. I recognize that look in your boys' eyes. The one that says they've seen too much. My sister, Michael added. 3 months in her car. I told you, we don't care where you came from. Kate's voice was firm. We care that you can cook circles around anyone in Detroit. Anderson cleared his throat. The lawyer's letter mentioned the health inspection too. This is coordinated. So we fight back. Sarah straightened. Every record perfect. Every plate perfect. Every service perfect. They'll dig into your past, Anderson warned. Let them. Sarah checked the time. Right now, we have dinner service to finish. Questions? Her team, and they were her team now, moved back to their stations. Orders resumed. Later, after cleanup, Sarah found a new note in her locker. But this one read, Got your back, chef. The kitchen upstairs, her boys slept peacefully. Sarah sat at the small kitchen table, reviewing records for Monday's inspection. The light above Anderson's office still burned. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael, early delivery tomorrow. We'll be ready. Sarah looked around the apartment. Her home now, earned through skill and determination. Let them investigate. Let them dig. She had a kitchen to run. Sarah's phone rang at 10:42 a.m., right in the middle of prep for lunch service. Marcus's school. Mrs. Williams? There's been an incident with Tommy. Her knife paused over the shallots. What kind of incident? He's had another coughing fit. Passed out in PE class. We need you two. Chef. Kate burst through the kitchen doors. Health inspector's here. 3 hours early. Sarah's world narrowed to 2 impossible choices. Tommy needed her. But if she left now, with a surprise inspection underway, I'll get Tommy. Michael wiped his hands. My sister's a nurse at Detroit General. I'll take him there, stay with him. Michael. Trust me, chef. Run your kitchen. Sarah squeezed his arm, then turned to face the inspector. The woman wore a crisp blazer and carried a tablet, her face professionally neutral. Sarah Williams? She checked her paperwork. I'm Linda Martinez. Shall we begin? The inspection started in the walk-in. Sarah's heart pounded as Martinez checked temperatures, examined date labels, tested storage conditions. Recent temperature fluctuations? Martinez indicated the logs. Equipment malfunction. Resolved and documented. Sarah pointed to the maintenance records. Daily monitoring since. A crash from the line made them both turn. Brian was picking up scattered pans, face red. Sorry, chef. Shelf bracket gave way. Martinez made a note. Sarah's stomach tightened. The inspection continued. Every surface scrutinized. Every record examined. Sarah answered questions on autopilot, half her mind with Tommy. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michael. At hospital. Tommy's stable. Doctor checking him now. These cleaning logs. Martinez frowned. The signatures changed last week. Staff turnover, Sarah explained. Former employee was terminated for violation of kitchen policies. The same employee who filed complaints? Sarah met her eyes. Yes. Martinez's tablet chimed. New document uploaded to your file. Letter from Jerome Stevens' lawyer. Sarah read quickly. Jerome claimed she'd forced him to falsify cleaning logs. Alleged unsafe conditions. Mentioned her homeless background 3 times. Chef. Kate appeared pale. Lunch service starts in 10 minutes. I'll observe, Martinez said. The first ticket came in at 12:01. Sarah called orders, watching Martinez watch her kitchen. Fire 2 salmon, 1 risotto. Kate, where's table 4's appetizer? Coming up. Behind you hot. Everything moved smoothly until 12:23. That's when Sarah smelled gas. Everyone stopped. She traced the odor to the range. The safety valve had been loosened. Recently, Martinez took photos while Sarah shut off the gas main. Deliberate tampering? Yes. Sarah's voice was ice. But not by my staff. Her phone buzzed again. Michael, Tommy has pneumonia. Need your insurance card. Sarah's hands shook as she texted back the information. The lunch rush waited for no one. Switch to electric ranges, she ordered. Modify the fish prep. Brian, adjust cooking times accordingly. Martinez made more notes. The rest of service was a blur of adaptations and worry. Every plate perfect, despite the handicapped kitchen. Every protocol followed. At 2:30, Martinez closed her tablet. I'll need to review all documentation. You'll have my report in 48 hours. After she left, Sarah finally let herself shake. Kate pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. Go to Tommy. We'll handle cleanup. The hospital corridors seemed endless. Sarah found Michael in pediatrics, reading a magazine to her son. Mama! Tommy's voice was weak, and 4 dripped fluids into his thin arm. Hey, baby. Sarah touched his forehead. Still hot. How's my brave boy? Mr. Michael knows all the nurses, Tommy said. And I got popsicles. The doctor arrived with x-rays. Walking pneumonia, probably developing for weeks. The cold nights in the alley had taken their toll. He'll need bed rest, the doctor said. And these prescriptions, insurance should cover most. It will. Sarah remembered Anderson's words. Coverage kicked in after 90 days. They had 3 weeks to go. Her phone buzzed. Anderson, Martinez called. Kitchen passed preliminary inspection. Some concerns about equipment tampering. Police report recommended. Another text arrived. Unknown number. Street rats carry disease. Keep your sick kid out of my kitchen. Sarah deleted it without letting Michael see. Thank you for everything today. Family meal means family, he said simply. Back at the restaurant, dinner prep was underway. Brian had replaced all the range connections. Kate was stress baking bread. Chef. Anderson waited in his office. Jerome's lawyer sent more documents. Claims about your work history. Allegations of theft at previous jobs. All lies. I know. Anderson slid over a paper. But the bank's concerned. Our investors are asking questions. Sarah read the letter. Phrases jumped out. Financial liability, public relations risk, background verification required. They can't verify what doesn't exist, she said quietly. 3 months of my life, I was invisible. Just another homeless person to ignore. Sarah. Her phone buzzed yet again. The hospital. Tommy's insurance was being questioned. Something snapped. Sarah walked into her kitchen. Her staff, her family looked up. "Chef?" Kate asked. "I need to tell you everything," Sarah said. "About the alleys. About Jerome. About why I'm not leaving, no matter what they throw at us." She talked. About the nights huddled against brick walls. About Tommy's cough starting in the cold. About the endless shelter wait lists. About survival. When she finished, Brian spoke first. "My mom's shelter. They keep records. Proof you try to get help. My sister's caseworker," Michael added. "She'll testify about shelter conditions this winter. The hospital social worker who helped me," Kate said. "She'll remember you and the boys." Sarah's phone buzzed one last time. "Anderson, board meeting tomorrow. They want to meet the chef they're fighting for." She looked at her kitchen, at the people who'd become her shield against the past. "Dinner service in 30 minutes, she said. "Let's show this city what we can do." They moved to their stations. Professional. Focused. Ready. Sarah tied her apron, thinking of Tommy in his hospital bed, of Marcus doing homework upstairs, of the alleys that had failed to break them. Let Jerome dig. Let the investors question. She had plates to perfect. Tommy's hospital room had a view of the Detroit River. Sarah sat beside his bed at dawn, watching cargo ships crawl past while her son slept. The pneumonia was improving, but slowly. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the restaurant's investors. The board meeting was in 2 hours. "Chef." Michael stood in the doorway, carrying coffee and a paper bag. "Brought you breakfast. Kitchen's prepped for lunch service." "Thanks." Sarah checked Tommy's temperature. "Nearly normal. Marcus get to school okay?" Kate walked him. Said he ate 3 croissants during prep. Tommy stirred, coughing. "Mama, can I have croissants too?" "Once you're better, baby." Sarah smoothed his hair. "Mr. Michael's going to stay with you while I go to a meeting." The hospital hallway smelled of disinfectant. Michael caught her arm before she left. "They're going to ask about Jerome's latest claims. Let them." Sarah straightened her chef's whites. "I've got something else to show them." Anderson's conference room held 8 people in expensive suits. Sarah recognized some from promotional photos on the restaurant's website. Investors. Board members. A lawyer. Mrs. Williams, a gray-haired man at the head of the table, checked his notes. Or should I say, Chef Williams? "Chef is fine." Sarah set a folder on the table. "I understand you have concerns." "Concerns?" The lawyer shuffled papers. "Your former employee alleges health code violations, falsified records, and misrepresentation of qualifications. The publicity alone." "I brought you something." Sarah opened her folder. A new tasting menu. 7 courses, each telling part of Detroit's story. The board members exchanged glances. Anderson, seated quietly in the corner, smiled slightly. Chef Williams, the gray-haired man Johnson, according to his nameplate, leaned forward. "We're not here to discuss menus." First course, Sarah continued, passing out papers. Smoked whitefish pate with pickled urban farm vegetables. Served on house-made crackers using Michigan wheat. Mrs. Williams. Second course. Multicultural Detroit. Fusion dumplings filled with slow-braised short rib, served with soul food-inspired greens and Middle Eastern spices. The lawyer tried again. The legal liability. Third course. Sarah's voice strengthened. Recovery and resilience. Duck breast with cherry port reduction. The same dish that got me this job, served the night Mr. Anderson found my children and me in that alley. Silence fell. Sarah laid out the remaining courses. Each dish wove together techniques from her years in kitchens with ingredients that told Detroit's story. Final course, she finished. Hope in dark places. Dark chocolate mousse with preserved summer berries and fresh mint. The berries come from community gardens planted in empty lots. The mint grows in the restaurant's rooftop garden. Johnson studied the menu. "This is ambitious." "It's us." Sarah met his eyes. "It's Detroit. A city that keeps standing, keeps feeding people, keeps finding beauty in hard places. The cost of ingredients, someone started. I've calculated everything. Using local suppliers cuts transportation costs. Urban farms give us premium ingredients at fair prices. My staff is already trained in these techniques." Anderson spoke for the first time. Revenue projections? 30% increase in dinner service. Sarah pulled out more papers, based on comparable menus in similar markets, plus positive press coverage for supporting local producers. Press coverage? The lawyer latched onto that. With your background. My background is the story. Sarah's hands were steady now. Woman loses everything. City helps her rebuild. She feeds that city in return. You want publicity? That's your angle. Johnson tapped the menu. These dishes. You can execute them consistently? Come to the kitchen, Sarah said. I'll show you. The board followed her downstairs. Her staff was waiting, stations prepped. Chef? Kate stood ready at pastry. 7-course tasting menu, Sarah called. Full presentation. They moved like a machine. Each dish emerged exactly as Sarah had described. The board members sat at the prep table, tasting. The fusion dumplings, Johnson said after the 2nd course. These will be your signature dish? One of them, Sarah plated the duck course. Every item tells a story. The story matters, Anderson added quietly. Ask any of our regulars. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text from Michael. Tommy ate soup. Doctor says fever's gone. The timing was perfect. She just served the final course when her phone rang. Marcus's school. Mrs. Williams? Marcus got into a fight. A boy was making comments about your family's previous situation. Sarah's heart clenched. Is he okay? He's fine. But we need you to pick him up. Johnson was watching her. Sarah took a breath. My son needs me, she said. Just like I needed this city. That's what this menu is about, taking care of our own. The board will discuss, Johnson began. Discuss what? Anderson stood. You've tasted her food. You've seen her kitchen. What else matters? The legal concerns. I've got documentation. Brian stepped forward. From my mother's shelter. Proof chef was trying to get help last winter. Medical records, Kate added. From when she brought Tommy to free clinics. Michael's voice came from the door. My sister's caseworker has records too. About shelter conditions, wait lists. Sarah looked at her team. Her family. Johnson tasted the chocolate mousse. This mint. From the roof. Yes. Show me the garden. Sarah led the board upstairs. The rooftop garden was small but thriving. Herbs and edible flowers grew in neat beds. The boys helped tend it, she explained. Tommy's learning about growing food. Marcus is writing a school paper about urban farming. Johnson nodded slowly. Chef Williams, this menu. It's not just food, is it? No, sir, it's a promise. To this city, to my boys, to every person who thinks they've lost everything. Sarah touched a mint plant. There's always a way forward. Her phone buzzed again. Michael, Tommy's being discharged tomorrow. Doctor says rest at home for a week. Home. The apartment above the kitchen. The garden on the roof. The family sheet found here. The board votes tomorrow, Johnson said. But speaking personally, I haven't tasted food with this much heart in years. Sarah looked out over Detroit's skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus waited at school. Tommy rested in his hospital bed. And below, her kitchen hummed with life. Thank you for tasting, she said. Now, if you'll excuse me, my son needs me. She headed for the stairs, then paused. Dinner service is at 6. The new menu debuts tonight. You're all welcome to see what else this kitchen can do. The board members filed out. Anderson lingered. You knew, Sarah said. You knew they'd respond to the story. I knew they'd respond to truth, he corrected. Go get Marcus. Kitchen's got dinner covered. Sarah untied her apron. Beyond the garden, more ships crossed the river. The city moved and breathed and survived. Just like she had. Just like she would. The morning sun hadn't yet reached Detroit streets when Sarah started prep for the most important service of her life. Tommy sat wrapped in blankets in the office, still recovering but unwilling to stay upstairs alone. Marcus worked on homework at the corner desk. Orders are already coming in, Kate said, checking the reservations. Food critics from 3 papers. Some food bloggers. The board members are all coming back. Sarah nodded, focusing on her knife work. The vegetables for the first course needed to be uniformly diced. Perfect. Precise. Chef. Michael entered carrying boxes of fresh produce. Urban Farms delivered early. Everything you asked for. The kitchen hummed with nervous energy. Every surface gleamed. Every station was stocked. Sarah had triple-checked everything herself. "Mama." Tommy's voice was still raspy. "Can I help?" Sarah paused in her cutting. "Baby, you need to rest. Please? I can fold napkins. Marcus showed me how." She looked at her son, bundled in the office chair. The hospital had discharged him yesterday. Strict instructions for bed rest. But his eyes were bright, eager to be part of this. "Okay, but you stay in that chair, understand?" The morning passed in careful preparation. Sarah's special menu required precise timing. Each component had to be ready at exactly the right moment. At 4 o'clock, Anderson arrived. Health Department's final report came in. Sarah wiped her hands. And clean bill of health. They're noting the equipment tampering as a separate issue. He smiled. Jerome's lawyer won't like that. The first critics arrived at 5:30, early for the first seating. Sarah watched through the kitchen window as they were seated. "James Chin from the Free Press," Kate whispered. "Maria Santos from the food blog Detroit Plates. And that's Robert Nash from—" "I know who they are." Sarah checked the first course components. "Fire table 1 in 10 minutes. Tommy had fallen asleep in the office, napkins perfectly folded beside him. Marcus sat doing his science homework, occasionally looking up to watch the kitchen's controlled chaos. "First course is going out," Sarah called. The whitefish pâté was a symphony of local ingredients. Sarah had spent days perfecting the balance of smoke and brine, the texture of the house-made crackers. "Chef." A server returned with Chin's empty plate. He asks if the pickled vegetables are from Recovery Park. Sarah nodded. Every ingredient told part of Detroit's story. Her story. The second course moved out smoothly. Sarah's fusion dumplings, each pleated by hand, nestled in a sauce that bridged cultures. "Santos is taking pictures," Michael reported. "Lots of pictures." More diners filled the restaurant. Sarah recognized Johnson and other board members at a corner table. The lawyer sat with them, frowning at his menu. "Fire table 4. Watch those temperatures on the duck." The third course was her proof of concept. The same dish that had earned her this chance, refined and elevated. Tommy woke up coughing. Sarah paused in her plating to bring him water. "You're doing great, Mama," he whispered. "Third course is cleared," Kate called. "Chin's making notes." The kitchen moved like a dance now. Each station coordinated, each plate perfect. Sarah lost herself in the rhythm of service. "Chef." Anderson appeared at her elbow. "Nash is asking about the urban farm program." "Tell him everything," Sarah said, adjusting a garnish. "About the rooftop garden, the community partnerships." The fourth and fifth courses went out without a hitch. Sarah's hands stayed steady, even when she saw the critics conferring over their plates. "Mama." Marcus approached the line. "Tommy's fever's up a little." Sarah looked at the clock. 2 courses left. "Take him upstairs, baby. Get him to bed." "I want to stay," Tommy protested weakly. "Go rest, sweetheart. I'll be up soon." The 6th course was her most technically challenging. Sarah had designed it to showcase every skill she'd learned in 20 years of kitchens. "Santos is on her phone," Kate reported. "Posting already?" "Focus on the food," Sarah reminded her team. "Let them write what they write." The final course. Sarah's promise captured in chocolate and berries. "Hope in dark places." "Chef." Michael's voice was odd. "You need to see this." He held up his phone. Detroit Plates had already posted their first impression. The headline read, "From city streets to city's best. Anderson's new chef redefines Detroit dining." Later, Sarah said, "Finish service first." The last plates went out at 10. Sarah's legs shook with exhaustion as she watched the critics leave. "They're still talking outside," Brian reported from the window. "Let them talk." Sarah started cleanup. "We got breakdown to do." Anderson appeared with a bottle of champagne. "Board's leaving. Johnson wants to know if you're free for breakfast tomorrow. Tommy has a doctor's appointment. Bring him along." Johnson's wife is a pediatrician. The kitchen slowly returned to order. Sarah's team moved quietly, professionally, but she could feel their tension. "Chef." Kate held out her phone. Chin's Twitter. The message was short. "Extraordinary meal at Anderson's tonight. New tasting menu redefines what Detroit cuisine can be. Full review tomorrow, but spoiler. This is the best meal I've had all year." Sarah sat down hard on a prep stool. "Mama." Marcus's voice carried from upstairs. Tommy's asking for you. Go, Michael said. We got this. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly. Her boys were in their beds, real beds, in a real home. Tommy's breathing was easier. Did you win, Mama? He asked sleepily. Sarah kissed his forehead. The fever was down. Yeah, baby. I think we did. Her phone buzzed. A text from Johnson. Board vote was unanimous. Contracts being drawn up. Welcome to Anderson's officially. Another message followed, this one from an unknown number. Jerome, this isn't over. Sarah deleted it without a second thought. Below, she could hear her kitchen being put to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But tonight her boys were safe. Her food had spoken for itself. Her team had proved what they could do. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Kate brought up leftovers. And Mr. Anderson says to tell you the critic from the Free Press made a reservation for his mother's birthday next month. Sarah looked at her son, stronger now, standing straighter. No longer the scared boy from the alley. Hungry? She asked. Starving. They ate at their small kitchen table, listening to the familiar sounds of restaurant life winding down below. Tomorrow would bring reviews, meetings, and decisions. But tonight, they were home. The real estate agent's heels clicked on hardwood floors as she led Sarah through another apartment. 2 bedrooms, newly renovated kitchen, and it's only 6 blocks from the restaurant. Sarah checked the windows, good insulation, no drafts. The kitchen was small but efficient. Down the hall, she heard Marcus and Tommy exploring the bedrooms. Mama, Tommy called. This one has a desk built in. The agent smiled. Perfect for homework. And the building has security cameras, controlled access. Sarah ran her hand along the kitchen counter. After 3 months as Anderson's official head chef, her salary could cover this place easily. But something held her back. The lease requires first and last month's rent, the agent continued, plus security deposit. That's fine. Sarah opened the dishwasher, checking the mechanisms. When could we move in? 2 weeks? We'll need to process your application, run credit checks. Mama, Marcus appeared. Can we pay my room blue? The agent's phone buzzed. She checked it and gasped. Oh my goodness. You're that chef. From the article. The Detroit Free Press piece had run last week. From streets to Michelin stars. How one chef is changing Detroit's food scene. The photo showed Sarah in her kitchen, Tommy and Marcus helping in the rooftop garden. The apartment's yours if you want it, the agent said quickly. I'll waive the application fee. Sarah shook her head. No special treatment. Process everything normally. Back at the restaurant, lunch service was in full swing. Michael had everything running smoothly. Chili called. He reported as Sarah tied on her apron. They want to film a segment next week. Something about inspiring female chefs. Tell them no cameras in the kitchen during service. Sarah checked the tickets. How's the new kid doing? Devin, their new prep cook, was carefully dicing vegetables. His hands shook slightly. He's got potential, Michael said quietly. Reminds me of someone else who needed a chance. Sarah watched Devin work. His cuts weren't perfect, but he was trying. She'd seen him sharing his lunch with Tommy yesterday, telling stories about his own little sister. Show him the proper knife grip, she said, and get him a real chef's coat. No more borrowed ones. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers. Sarah's tasting menu had put Anderson's on the map. Reservations were booked weeks in advance. Chef, Kate appeared with a folder. The food magazine wants final approval on the recipe they're publishing. Sarah glanced at the page. Her fusion dumplings. The dish that had helped convince the board. Add a note, she said. About sourcing ingredients from local farms, Tommy sat at his usual spot in the office, doing math homework. His health had improved steadily over the past months. Mrs. Chin's teaching me fractions with dumpling recipes, he announced proudly. Smart lady. Sarah kissed his head. How's the new medicine working? No coughing at all today. The insurance had kicked in fully now. Tommy saw a specialist regularly, had proper medications. No more free clinic visits or skip treatments. Chef, Anderson stood in the doorway. Got a minute? In his office, Anderson spread out blueprints. The building next door. Owners willing to sell. Expansion? If you're interested. Bigger kitchen. Private dining room. Maybe a teaching space? Sarah studied the plans. Teaching space? Community programs, cooking classes, job training. Anderson smiled. Your stories inspired some donors. Sarah thought of Devin at his prep station, of Michael's sister, back on her feet now, of all the others still needing a chance. Let me see the numbers, she said. The dinner rush brought familiar chaos. Sarah moved through her kitchen with confidence, calling orders, checking plates. Behind you, chef. Corner. Fire table 6. Devin dropped a pan with a crash. The kitchen went silent. You okay? Sarah asked calmly. I'm sorry, chef. I didn't. Accidents happen. Clean it up, start fresh. Michael, show him that grip again. The tension broke. Work resumed. After service, Sarah gathered her team. Family meal in 10. Devin, you're cooking? The young man paled. Chef. Michael will help. Show us what you can do. Devin's hands shook less as he worked. The simple pasta dish he prepared wasn't perfect, but it was made with care. Good balance of flavors, Sarah told him. Tomorrow we'll work on your sauce technique. Tommy and Marcus joined them at the prep table, sharing food and stories. Mrs. Chun from next door brought dumplings. Kate's girlfriend arrived with fresh bread. Chef. Anderson called from his office. Phone call. The landlord had approved their application. The apartment was theirs. Sarah returned to the kitchen. Her family, biological and chosen, sat together, laughing over Devin's pasta. Everything okay, Mama? Marcus asked. Perfect, baby. Sarah sat between her boys. How do you feel about moving in 2 weeks? Tommy's eyes went wide. Our own place? 6 blocks away. You can still come to the kitchen after school. Can I still help in the garden? Of course. Sarah squeezed his hand. This is still home, too. Later, after cleanup, Sarah found a note in the office. Devin's handwriting. Thank you for the chance, chef. She pinned it next to the restaurant reviews, the magazine article, the photo of her boys in the garden. Ready, Mama? Marcus stood with their coats. Tommy's already counting the blocks to the new apartment. Sarah looked around her kitchen one last time. Tomorrow would bring more orders, more challenges, more chances to help others find their way. Just like someone had helped her. Ready, she said. Let's go home. 1 year to the day after Sarah had slept in that alley with her boys. She stood in Anderson's expanded kitchen, watching a new group of trainees learn to dice onions. Remember to curl your fingers, she demonstrated. Let the knife guide along your knuckles. 20 people in crisp white coats followed her movements. The new teaching kitchen had opened last month, funded by a community grant. 3 nights a week, Sarah taught basic culinary skills to people wanting a fresh start. Chef. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Like this? Sarah checked her technique. Perfect, Maria. You got a natural feel for it. The woman smiled, pride replacing uncertainty. Sarah had met her at the shelter last week. The same one she and her boys had tried to get into a year ago. Time to prep for service. Michael called from the main kitchen. Students, wrap up your stations. Sarah watched them clean with growing confidence. 3 of her previous students already worked in respected Detroit kitchens. 2 more had interviews next week. Mama! Tommy's voice carried from the office. Look what I got on my science test. He ran in waving a paper, healthy color in his cheeks. The pneumonia was long gone, replaced by the energy of a growing 7-year-old. A perfect score. Sarah hugged him. Did you show Mr. Anderson? He said I can help plant tomatoes in the roof garden tomorrow. The garden had tripled in size, now supplying vegetables to both the restaurant and a local food bank. Marcus had written a school paper about urban agriculture that won a citywide contest. Chef. Kate appeared with a clipboard. Tonight's reservations are full. Plus the food writer from Chicago. Sarah nodded. Special menu? Already prepped. Devin's got the sauce station running perfectly. Devin had earned his stripes quickly. Now he trained new cooks with the same patience others had shown him. Mrs. Williams? Maria approached hesitantly. I wanted to thank you for this program. Sarah recognized the look in her eyes, the same one she'd had that night Anderson found them. Come back tomorrow, Sarah said. We're doing sauce work. Foundation of everything. The main kitchen buzzed with pre-service energy. Sarah's team moved with practiced precision, each person knowing their role. Order came in for your famous dumplings, Michael reported. Table of 12. Sarah smiled. The fusion dumplings had become Anderson's signature dish. Food magazines called them a perfect metaphor for Detroit's revival. Chef. Anderson stood in the office doorway. Got a minute? Inside, he handed her an envelope. Just sign the papers. It's official. Sarah read quickly. Anderson's was now Anderson and Williams' Gym. You earned it. He gestured at the framed reviews on the wall. This place has doubled its business since you came. The teaching programs, changing lives. Sarah thought of Maria in the classroom, of Devin at his station, of all the others who just needed someone to open a door. Partner status means more paperwork, Anderson continued. Board meetings, investor relations. I can handle it. Of course you can. That's why I chose you that night. Sarah looked out the office window. The kitchen hummed with life. In the classroom, students cleaned their stations. Tommy did homework in his usual spot. Special delivery. Marcus's voice carried over the noise. He appeared carrying a cake box from the bakery down the street. What's this? Sarah asked. Anniversary surprise. Tommy jumped up. 1 year since Mr. Anderson found us. The kitchen staff gathered around as Marcus opened the box. Inside, a chocolate cake bore the message. Happy Family Day. We all pitched in, Kate explained. Mrs. Chun made dumplings too. And look, Tommy pointed out the window. Snow fell softly past the glass, the first of the season. But unlike last year, no one in this room would sleep in the cold. Speech, someone called. Sarah looked at her assembled family, biological and chosen. At Anderson, who'd seen past circumstances to ability. At her boys, growing strong and confident. Back to work, she said instead. We've got service in 30 minutes. They laughed, knowing her heart was too full for words. The team dispersed to their stations. Chef, Devin called. There's someone at the back door. Sarah went to check. A woman stood there, 2 small children clutching her coat. I'm sorry, she said quickly. We've been sleeping in the parking garage, and I smelled food. Sarah looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the desperation, the hope dying in her eyes. Are you hungry? The woman nodded. Come in. Sarah held the door wider. I've got a teaching kitchen with your name on it. The children stared wide-eyed at the gleaming space. Sarah remembered Tommy and Marcus 1 year ago, looking just as lost. But I can't, the woman started. Yes, you can. Sarah led them to the classroom. We'll start with knife skills, then sauces. Foundation of everything. Why? Sarah thought of Anderson's words. Sometimes people just need a door opened. Because a year ago, someone gave me a chance. She handed the woman an apron. I'm Sarah Williams, welcome to my kitchen. Outside, snow continued to fall. But inside Anderson and Williams, warmth and hope filled every corner. Sarah watched the woman tie on her apron with shaking hands. Another circle beginning. Another story starting. Just as it should.